went looking for trouble. And boy, I found her. She's in love with herself. She likes the dark. Grey Wolf Studios.
Which leads me to talking about the how to program ESCs and go through and explain the various settings and stuff of ESCs. So there's basically three ways to program an ESC. One is manually. I'll just take this. I'll take this RX8 out of the box here. Let me back this out a little bit, and just to show you guys. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have an RX8, they're probably the easiest ESC to program manually because they actually have two buttons right here, and then they have an LED light for every one of these a set of initials here. And by using the LEDs and these two buttons, you can manually set the settings on this RX8. Now, that's really handy if you're out in the field, because once you've programmed an RX8 a couple of times manually, it's really easy to remember what the different settings are because of the initials right here. That's a huge advantage to an RX8 because virtually none of the other ESCs I've ever used are like that. If you try to set a Castle ESC or a Hobbywing ESC or whatever out in the field manually, you're gonna have to have the book to go by because it basically relies on, it's usually one button and one LED that flashes. Or maybe two LEDs or something that flash. But it's usually a lot more complicated to remember than an RX8. Let's see what else. So you can do it manually. Then you can do it using a programming card. And give me 1 second, and I'll be right back with one of those. Okay, here is my various programming cards that I have. This is a programming card for Castle ESCs. This can be used out in the field. You basically just plug your ESC into this prong right here, and then you just turn the ESC on. The battery from your LiPo battery basically will power the ESC and this card, and then the ESC will power the card. And then so this spells out everything and what strength it's set at, and all this stuff. Makes it much more simple to program than trying to remember a sequence of LED flashes. And this is a Castle one for ground vehicles. This is another Castle programming card, and the Castle field links, as they call them. That's what Castle calls them, is their field links. They're actually very cheap and cheesy, especially for as much as they cost. I was kind of bummed out by how cheap and cheesy they were because I want to say these are 20 or 25 bucks a piece, and basically all they are is a piece of foam with a real thin circuit board on the bottom of it, wrapped in soft plastic. It's just very cheap and cheesy, easy to break actually if you're not careful with them. This is one for air vehicles, Castle Air ESCs. ESCs for air, um, helicopters or planes or whatever are different from ground vehicles. You don't want to intermix the two, at least as far as I know. I'm just now getting into helicopters. I believe they're different. I'm fairly certain they have different settings in them, but I haven't really gotten my first helicopter together and up and flying yet. So I'm still a complete noob on helicopters at this point. But anyway, I'm fairly confident that uh, an ESC for flying is going to be drastically different than one for driving. This is a Hobbywing ESC programming card, and unlike the Castle ones, this is actually fairly decent. It's got 4 buttons. The Castle one, it has some buttons, but they're kind of under here, and you kind of got to mash on them, and it's kind of hard to figure out exactly where the buttons are. This has 4 easy to use buttons, an LCD screen that tells you what item you're on and what the value is on that item, and then it's got a printout right here on the bottom of it that tells you what each item is. Like item 1 is running mode, item 2 is drag brake force, item 3 is cutoff threshold, and then it tells you underneath that what each value for that item means. So if we're on item 3, which is cutoff threshold, and we have a setting of 5, then or a value of 5, then we know our cutoff threshold is set for 3.2 volts per cell. I don't know why Castle's is so cheap and cheesy compared to Hobbywing, which is a much cheaper, budget type ESC. And actually, Hobbywing actually has a higher end programming card that you can actually do like firmware flashes and stuff to your Hobbywing ESCs. That's even nicer than this one. It is about twice as much. I want to say this one was 10 or 12 bucks when I bought it, and I think the high end one is 20 bucks. And I would have bought the high end one if they had them in stock at the time, but Hobby Parts is really bad about not having things in stock when you want them. So that covers manual programming and field programming via a programming card. There's also another way you can program your higher end ESCs, like Tegan and Castle, for example. Castle has what they call their Castle Link, which I referred to that earlier. This is a Castle Link, and basically your ESC hooks up to these prongs, and then you plug a mini USB cable into here, and then plug it into your computer. You install the software from their website, and then you can use your computer, your laptop or your desktop or whatever you have it hooked up to set all of the settings on your ESC. Now, the big advantage to using the Castle Link, and by the way, Castle's field links can also be used as a PC link as well. I happen to have both just because I got this for free with the Mama Max Pro that I bought. But before I got that, I had already bought a Field Link card, so I happen to have both. So I just keep the card in my. I have a backpack that I carry all my like batteries and electronics and fuel, and I do nitros as well as electronics, so fuel and starters and all that kind of crap. I have a backpack that I carry it in, so I just leave my field programmers in my backpack, and then I have this sitting in my desk for when I want to use the computer. Now, one of the big advantages of using the computer to program your stuff is you have a lot more control over the settings. You can control things like throttle curves. You can set throttle curves, brake curves, which the only way to do that is through the computer. You can't do that any other way. And I want to say that and flashing the firmware or updating the firmware on the ESC is probably the two big things about programming your ESC through the computer. Now you don't have to use the computer, obviously, and things like throttle curves and brake curves, you really only need to mess with that stuff if you're racing. I mean, if you're not racing and you have the stuff, then yeah, it's nice to be able to mess with sometimes, but you don't really need it, I wouldn't say, unless you're racing. However, updating the firmware on the ESCs sometimes can be really nice. Sometimes they add new features in or whatever. So anyway, that's Castle, or that's Castle's version. Tekin's version is essentially the same type of thing. They have what they call their hotwire digital interface. Oops, let me get it in focus there. The hotwire digital interface. It's essentially the same type of thing. You plug your ESC into this, and then you plug a mini USB into the interface, and you can use your computer. Again, you download the software from their website, use your computer, blah blah blah. Same principle. Now, as far as what all the settings are, I'll try to quickly cover that. Let me just start up. We'll just go through Castle's. I have the Castle software handy here. Alright, so we'll plug the USB into the Castle link. And we'll just use this little side loader here because I already know what I have it set to. And on the Castle link, you can see this red LED right here. This just means that there's no connection established with the ESC yet. And then I don't know if you guys can see this or not. Let me see if I can. Let's see if I can zoom in here. So let's see. Yeah. Let's see, can I focus close enough? Okay, so right underneath the LED, you can see a negative sign, a plus sign, and then there is another symbol there. I'm trying to get this thing to focus on it. So you can see a minus sign, a plus sign, and then like a U-shaped symbol. I don't know what that symbol's called, but basically it's easy enough to understand. The minus sign is where the negative hooks up, the positive hooks up in the middle, and then the signal wire is the U-shaped symbol, and it hooks up to the bottom peg there. And if you look on your ESCs, and I happen to have an example of both, like on the Castles, for example, your ESC wire that goes to your receiver is what you hook up to this Castle link. On the Castles, and you're going to find one of these two schemes typically throughout almost all the electronics, one of these two color schemes. You're either going to find this brown red and it's like an orangish yellow color wire. I don't know if you guys can see that real good there. But the brown is negative, the red in the middle is positive, and the yellowish orange wire is the signal wire. Now, in some electronics, like this Tekin here, for example, you have a black, red, and white yellow scheme. That one's really easy to figure out. Black, is always negative, red's always positive, white is the signal wire. I think the only exception to these two color schemes that I've seen is probably high-tech servos actually use, well, technically, I guess it's a variant of this brown, red, and yellowish orange scheme, because it is brown and red, but then it's like yellow. It's not like orangish yellow. It's like actually yellow, or maybe it's black, red, and yellow. I can't remember off the top of my head, and I don't have any high-tech servos handy. Anyway, high-techs are slightly different, but you get the picture. So anyway, we want to make sure for this, we want to make sure our negative is on the top and our signal wire is on the bottom. So we're going to plug it in like this. You're going to see that red starting to flash. The green is going to be solid. That means we've established a connection with the ESC, and which we can see because the green LED is flashing on the ESC itself.